Well, hello again, guys, and welcome back. And as you can see on your screen, we have this handsome laddie, or lassie, or you decide. But who does he look like? Yep, you've guessed it. Statue of Liberty. So, is the Statue of Liberty really based on this god, Attis? This Galatian god from Turkey that the Greeks adopted, then the Romans adopted, and then practically Europe transformed them into Columba, Isis, whatever. But this is Attis, and this is who I think the Statue of Liberty really is. Because when you look at the Statue of Liberty, guys, come on, that's a dude. That's a dude. Either way you look at it, that's a dude. Or it's a very feminine dude. Another picture. Another picture of Attis, there with the crown. Looks a lot like the Statue of Liberty, yeah? Anyway, guys, let's have a wee look at Attis here. I've spoken about him briefly before, and about the Galli cult. Well, this is connected to the Galli cult, which derives from Turkey. I think it was an old Celtic pagan cult, which was adopted by the Greeks. They sort of soaked it in, and the Romans absorbed it in as well, like a sponge, changed it to what they wanted. Anyway, guys, I'll read you a wee bit about him. Attis was the consort of Cybele and Phrygian in Greek mythology. His priests were eunuchs, the Galli, as explained by origin myths, pertaining to Attis and castration. Attis was also a Phrygian god of vegetation, and in his self-mutilation, death and resurrection, he represents the fruits of the earth which die in winter, only to rise again in the spring. The 19th century identification with the name Attis, encountered in Herodotus 34-45, as the historical name of the son of Croesus. Attis, the sun god, slain by the boar's tusk of winter, is mistaken. So here you can see that Attis cult began around 1250 BC in Dindamon, today's Murat, Geddes, in Turkey, by the way. So this isn't a Greek god or Roman god, it's a Turkish god from Geddes or Jedis. I'll say Geddes. I want to say Jedis. He was originally a local semi-deity of Phrygia, associated with the great Phrygian trading city of Pisinos. And the Phrygians, guys, if you've seen any Phrygian art, the best way to recognize a Phrygian in any art or statues is the hats. They usually wear funny hats. What's the little blue? They're called trolls? Is that what they're called? The wee blue guys that wear the white hats, the cartoons. I can't remember what they're called, but they've got a Phrygian style cap. That will come to me. The mountain was personified as a demon whom foreigners associated with the Great Mother Cybele. And the Great Mother Cybele, she was meant to be the mother of the gods. So she was the mother of the gods. In the late 4th century BC, a cult of Attis became a feature of the Greek world. The story of his origins at Agdistis, recorded by the traveller Pausanias, have some distinctly non-Greek elements. That's because these gods weren't Greek to begin with. Pausanias was told that the daemon, Agdistis, initially bore both male and female attributes, but the Olympian gods, fearing Agdistis, cut off the male organ and cast it away. There grew up from it an almond tree, and when its fruit was ripe, Nana, who was a daughter of the river god Sangarius, picked an almond and laid it in her bosom. The almond disappeared and she became pregnant. Nana abandoned the baby Attis. That sounds like the old Moses story. The infant was tended by a he-goat. A he-goat? As Attis grew, his long-haired beauty was godlike, and Agdistis, as Cybele then fell in love with him. But the foster parents of Attis sent him to Pisinos, where he was to wed the king's daughter. According to some versions, the king of Pisinos was Midas. Just as the marriage song was being sung, Agdistis Cybele appeared in her transcendent power, and Attis went mad and cut off his genitals. Attis' father-in-law-to-be, the king who was given his daughter in marriage, followed suit, prefiguring the self-castrating Corbantes who devote themselves to Cybele. But Agdistis repented and sought to the body of Attis should neither rot or nor decay. Anyway, guys, the point of this is the priests that followed this god were called the Galli. And the accounts say that these gods were castrating themselves. The gods. The Galli were castrating themselves, the priests. And they were practically just making music, making noise, jumping around like idiots by the sounds of it. And it just sounds like propaganda, Roman propaganda, to make the Galli look like she crazy people. But keep that in mind. The Galli. So Attis priests, or eunuchs, the Galli, right? Okay, we've got that. As neighbouring Lydia came to control Phrygia, the cult of Attis was given a Lydian context too. Attis is said to have introduced to Lydia the cult of the mother goddess Cybele, incurring the jealousy of Zeus, who sent a boar to destroy the Lydian crops. Then certain Lydians with Attis himself were killed by the boar. Pausanias adds to corroborate this story that the Gauls who inhabited Pisinos abstained from pork. So there's a Jewish, almost Jewish reference that the Gauls abstained from pork as well as Jews. This could link into the Celtic tribes being part of the lost tribes of Israel. This myth element may have been invented solely to explain the unusual dietary laws of the Lydian Gauls. In Rome, the eunuch followers of Cybele were known as Galli. All right. So the eunuch followers of Cybele were known as Galli. Right, let's have a look at the Lydian Gauls. Galatia. Ancient Galatia was an area in the highlands of central Anatolia in modern Turkey. Galatia was named for the immigrants Gauls from Thrace. And Thrace is modern Bulgaria, Greece area. It covered the area of Greece, Bulgaria, who settled here and became its ruling caste in the 3rd century BC, following the Gallic invasions of the Balkans in 279 BC. It has been called the Gallia of the East, Roman writers calling its inhabitants the Galli. So the inhabitants of Galatia were known as the Galli. But they also say that the priests that followed Attis and the cult of Cybele were known as Galli. At the end of the day, these were Druids, I think. You can call them Druids in the west of Europe. That's what we call them in Britain, Druids. But in Central Europe and closer to the Middle East, they were called Galli. They were the same thing. They were Druids. And the thing about the Druids and the Romans, I could see why the Romans would want to distort the image of these people, these Galli, because these Galli were very powerful. And the Romans conquered most of the Gallic people, but they found it very hard because of these Druids. And the power that these Druids had was predicting eclipses. They could predict solar, lunar eclipses. They could read the stars. Astronomy was high in the Galli's skills. They were skilled in astronomy, poetry, storytelling. Most of their knowledge was oral. They weren't allowed to write it down. So a lot of it has been lost. But I think the Romans plagiarized a lot of Celtic culture and Gallic culture. And this includes the heliocentric theory. The heliocentric theory, the theory that we rotate around the sun rather than the sun rotates around us. I think the Druids knew of this. I think the Druids knew of this. And it wasn't a matter of Rome against the rest of the world. When we're at school, the chronological sequence we seem to hear in history is like the ancient Egyptians. We get them thrown in as the oldest. Well, we'll get cavemen thrown in first, then the ancient Egyptians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and then the medieval times. We never hear about the people that were there already. Who did Rome conquer to become so big? It was the Gauls, the Galli, the Gallic people, the Celtic world. Europe was a Celtic place. Most of Europe was Celtic. Before Rome came to power, most of Europe was Celtic and Gallic. Rome conquered a lot of these Gallic tribes, Celtic tribes, even incorporated them into his army. But the problem he had was that some of these Gallic fighters wouldn't fight because of certain phenomena that was happening in the sky or certain fears over the Druids. So it wasn't the warriors that were the problem to the Romans. It was these Druids, these magic wizards almost, that bothered the Romans. And it was more of a world of, it was Latin Europe against North Europe, against Atlantic Europe, against the Celtic Europe, against Rome and the Greco Latin world. And it was the same with science, religion, everything. It was this battle between the Latin world and the Northern European world, the barbarian world, as they like to say. But the barbarian world was more established than the Roman world and had more customs, more ethics, better morality than these Romans. And I think the Romans are just hiding this, and they're doing it to this day. They're distorting history. They're distorting what the real story is here. And one of these ways is using things like Wikipedia and this rubbish. We have to wade through it, and you keep finding little mistakes that they make. So in my eyes, the Celtic world were very powerful. Their art was way ahead of Rome's. They were building roads before Rome. They were probably way ahead of the game when it came to astronomy, when it comes to Rome, the Gallic people. And once Rome conquered most of Europe, they absorbed in all these Celtic cultures. Anyway, I digress. I'll go back to this. So, ancient Galatia was an area in the highlands of central Anatolia and modern Turkey. Galatia was named after the immigrants of Gaul. So here we've established that these people that came from Galatia were the Galli, the Gauls or the Celts. But in the Attis article, the Galli, his priests were eunuchs, the Galli, as explained by origin myths. So they're kind of feminizing these Galli, these powerful men. Rome are almost feminizing them with castration. But castration wasn't even mentioned until the 10th century AD. It wasn't even mentioned until the 10th century AD. Castration about the Galli. So this sounds like they're trying to make the Druids, the Celtic Galli look bad and them look good. I mean, this is what it's all about, guys. So, Celtic Galatia, seeing something of a Hellenized savage in the Galatians, Francis Bacon and other Renaissance writers called the inhabitants Gallo-Graeci, or Gauls settled among Greeks, and the country Gallo-Graecia has had the 3rd century AD Latin historian Justin The more usual term in antiquity is Helenon Galatia of Diodorus Siculus, Bibliotheca Historica 32.5, in a passage that is translated, and were called Gallo-Greci because of the connection with the Greeks identifying Galatia in the Greek East as opposed to Gallia in the West. So, this is how far Celtic culture, this is how far the Gallic people were, and maybe even further. And like I said, guys, Galileo Galilei, and I'll screen share where Galileo Galilei is actually a place. It's crazy, guys. I didn't realize this until I was looking for the place names with Gal in it. So here, guys, this is a strange one. We've got the Sea of Galilee at Galileo, Tiberias. This is in Israel, guys. So in Israel, we have the Sea of Galilee at Galileo. So we've got Galileo Galilei here. Okay? Keep this in mind, guys. This is where I think they're hiding the truth in plain sight. So we've got the Galileo Galilei. I'll need to stop screen sharing again. So we've got the Galileo Galilei, the place, right? And we all know this is the famous scientist. He was an Italian polymath. Galileo is a central figure in the transition from natural philosophy to modern science, and in the transformation of scientific renaissance into a scientific revolution. Galileo's championing of heliocentrism. So this is where I think they're hiding the whole Gallic people. I think the Gallic people knew of heliocentrism. And there was a flat earther speaking the other night there, a guy called Isa Mahalski. He made a video. In fact, he made a video and he wasn't speaking. And he was talking of how the Babylonians could predict lunar eclipses or solar eclipses, and they thought the earth was flat. But here, guys, I'm sure the ancient people could predict the seasons without knowing the earth was a ball and on a tilt. Do you know what I mean? It's by looking at patterns over a long period of time. So I think the Gals and the Gaels, the Celtic Druids, have been watching the sky for a long time, and they probably realized it was heliocentric. But it goes on about how Galileo, and there's a bit at the bottom, it actually makes a reference to the Bible. Where is it? But it was to do with Acts 1:1. There was an argument, the Galileo argument. Let's see. But they mention Acts 1 in the Galileo argument, the Galileo affair, this argument that we're having. Let's see, is it the Astronomy? But Galileo was all about the sky. It was about observing the sky. And this is what the Druids done. They observed the sky. And it's funny how Galileo Galilei has practically named himself, because it wasn't his original name. His name wasn't originally Galileo Galilei. That's the thing. We'll go back down to his name. Let's see. There's so much about him. Right, his name. The surname Galilei derives from the given name of an ancestor, Galileo Bonatti, a physician, university teacher and politician who lived in Florence from 1370 to 1450. His descendants had changed their family name from Buonatti or Buonatti to Galilei in his honour in the late 14th century. Galileo Bonatti was buried in the same church, the Basilica of Santa Croce in Florence, where about 200 years later, his more famous descendant, Galileo Galilei, was buried. So that's That's a coincidence, isn't it? It was common for mid-16th century Tuscan families to name the eldest son after the parent's surname. Hence, Galileo Galilei was not necessarily named after his ancestor, Galileo Bonatti. The Italian male given name Galileo, and thence the surname Galilei, derives from the Latin Galileus, meaning of Galilee, a biblically significant region of northern Israel people, which I just showed you on Google Earth. The biblical roots of Galileo's name and surname were to become the subject of a famous pun. In 1614, during the Galileo affair, one of Galileo's opponents, the Dominican priest Tommaso Caccini, delivered against Galileo a controversial and influential sermon. In it, he made a point of quoting Acts 1:1. Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? That's interesting, people, isn't it? Ye men of Galilee, why ye stand gazing up into heaven? And here it is here. Which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like the manner as ye have seen him go into heaven. So that's interesting. Staring up into heaven. Men of Galilee, standing, gazing into heaven. So there were star watchers who were gazing into heaven. They can construe this as staring up at heaven, waiting for Jesus to come, or watching Jesus go. But the men of Galilee are gazing up into heaven. And if you type in man of Galilee, what do you get? Men of Galilee, man of Galilee. Man of Galilee is a name for Jesus Christ, people. So, was Jesus Christ a Druid? Was Jesus Christ Gallic? Was Jesus even his own name? Is Jesus just a name for the Latin, Roman Catholics to use? Because here, guys, everyone thinks the sun shines out of Jesus's butt. But you've got to remember, you've got the Jesuits here. If the Jesuits are so bad, if the Jesuits are so deceitful, well, they use the guy's name, Jesus. Jesus' soldiers. That's what Jesuits are. Jesus' soldiers. So these guys are fighting for Jesus, and these are meant to be the bad guys. Well, maybe they are. Maybe they're hiding this in plain sight, this clue that the men of Galilee, the Gaels, were the ones that figured out the heliocentric model. And the Latin world plagiarized it. And they slapped on a character like Galileo Galilei to the theory. Because the men of Galilee is another name for Jesus Christ. This is just weird. It just sends you around in circles. So this is what I think, guys. I think the men of Galilee were Gallic. They were sky watchers. They were druids. They were powerful. They were powerful before Rome became powerful. And they spread from all the way from Britain right through to the Middle East, even maybe into Turkey. Into Egypt. I would say they went even as far as Egypt, these people. And here's the Druids here. These, I think, are the same as the Galli. And they had their own philosophy, which the thing is, most of the records for these guys were written by the Romans and the Greeks because they kept everything oral. But it's definitely something you should look into. And these were the powerful guys. These were the people that Rome tried to destroy completely, to take control of the Gallic people, to get control of the Gaels, the Celtic people. They had to get control of these guys. Because these guys, see him standing there with the moon in his hand? These are the guys that could predict the eclipses. These were the guys that could predict the stars. predict the movement of the gods, should we say. And this used to strike fear into their own people. So the Romans couldn't even control the Gallic people because of these guys here. And they've done a good job of distorting what these guys really were. They were scientists. They were ancient scientists. And I think they've slapped guys like Galileo Galilei with these names, almost laughing in your face, hiding it with Acts 1 in the Bible, Jesus. It's all just looks like a Jesuit conspiracy to hide the Celtic culture that probably were leading the way when it came to the stars in the sky. Ask the Druids. Ask Caesar. Anyway, guys, I'll finish with a picture of the dying Gaul. And this is a sculpture from the 1st century BC. They don't know who the sculptor was, but it's just an amazing picture. And whoever sculpted it obviously had a respect for the Celtic people, the Celtic warriors. And you can just see how this warriors just accepted death with dignity. Anyway, people, I'm going to end it here. Thanks for watching. I'll be back very soon. But keep this in mind that, like I said, I think the Roman Catholic world, the Latin world, has hid a lot of our history and distorted a lot of history. And a lot is hidden in plain sight. A lot is looking at you in the face. You just need to know what to look for. Anyway, guys, take it easy. And I'll see you very soon. Cheers.